You know, when you read the Bible, you will not understand everything. But as you're going to read this chapter 1, you're going to listen to beautiful music that Janine has put on. Something happens when we read. We are exposed to the Word of God. And I don't know of anything more important than reading the Bible.
The words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah. In the month of Kislev in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, "Those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire." When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Then I said, "Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins we, Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We have acted very corruptly against you, and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, nor the ordinances which you commanded your servant Moses. Remember, I pray, the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, 'If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations.' But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though some of you were cast out to the farthest part of the heavens, yet I will gather them from there and bring them to the place which I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. Now these are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand."
Chapter 1, Nehemiah, understanding by Hanani. Strange names. The misery, hopelessness of Jerusalem, mourns, fasts, and prays. And we're going to look at his prayer. You know, my friend, prayer is such a sacred thing. And Jesus gave us an example in the Lord's Prayer, how to pray. The words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa. The words, what does that mean? Remember, we're doing exegesis. We're going to take out what we see here. The Hebrew is debarim, literally words, but also in the sense of history or memoirs are used here. So this broadens the beauty of the Bible. Nehemiah means Yahweh has comforted. What a beautiful word. Are you crying? Are you experiencing pain, disappointment, rejection? Nehemiah, Yahweh has comforted. He's got a way to comfort us, you know. And we need comfort. We need Nehemiah. At least 2 other men of the post-exilic period bore this name. So different people, different times, got the same name. Neither of these men can be Nehemiah, the cupbearer of Artaxerxes. He was a celebrity, the one we're going to study now. For one lived in the time of Zerubbabel, that's long ago, a century earlier, and the contemporary of Nehemiah was a son of Azbuk, ruler of the half part of Beth Zur, while the author of the book was the son of Hakaliah, governor of Judea. In the month of Kislev, it is obvious from the statement in chapter 2, verse 1, that the 20th regnal year of King Artaxerxes is meant. So he was a king now for 20 years. In the 20th year of Artaxerxes, the month of Kislev, the 9th month, was December 5, 445 BC, through January 3, 444. So it was cold, and this was at Susa, a warm place in summer. A warm place, in winter. While I was in the citadel of Susa, called Susa by the Greeks, the old capital of Elam, on the Kerha River, about 100 miles, 161 kilometers north of the head of the Persian Gulf, it was one of several Persian capitals. Remember, we looked at the 4 different capitals. Other capital cities were Babylon, Ecbatana, and Persepolis. Persepogade was one as well, but it didn't feature any longer. Susa was primarily a winter capital because of its unpleasantly hot summers. Some have taken Susa to be the scene of some of Daniel's activities and the events described in the book of Esther. And while we were there a few months ago, we looked at the tomb of Daniel. It's so rich in history. Let's read Daniel's experience when he visited here at Susa, and then Queen Esther will tell us more of this famous ancient metropolis. Ulai was the Hebrew name for a river near the city of Susa. It was known as Aulus to the Greeks. It is mentioned twice in the Bible. Daniel 8 verse 2, in my vision, he writes, I saw myself in the citadel of Susa. So Daniel was here. This is so fantastic. In the province of Elam. In the vision, I was beside the Ulai canal. And I heard a man's voice from the Ulai calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. So here we've got it in the Bible, and we have it in archaeology. The river Ulai is also mentioned in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Remember, we discussed the Gilgamesh epic and the Enuma Elish clay tablet. May the sacred river of Ulaa mourn you, Endiku, along whose banks we walked in our vigor. Mordecai wrote the following words. It says, at that time King Xerxes, the wife, Esther's husband, reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. Verse 5 says, when these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. Here you see the Ulai River, and right at the far end you see a cone. That's the tomb of Daniel. You know, when you visit these sites, the Bible relives. Verse 2 says, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. The following words are from Nehemiah. I put in charge of Jerusalem my brother Hanani. So Hanani was his blood brother, along with Hananiah, the commander of the citadel, because he was a man of integrity and feared God more than most people do. I love this. He put him in charge. Why? Because he feared God more than most people do. Are you obeying God more than others do? This brings joy to his heart. Let's worship him. Let's fear him. Fear is not be scared. It's just adoration. Their arrival from Judah, their homeland, seems to have been the first contact Nehemiah had been able to make with the returned exiles in Judea. This was since the beginning of hostilities between Artaxerxes and Megabaesos. This is a little politics. The satrap of the province called Beyond the River, of which Judea was a part. During Megabaesos' rebellion, very little news from Judea have reached Nehemiah. Though he may have heard rumors of a Samaritan attack on Jerusalem and the destruction of the recently rebuilt city wall. This being the case, Nehemiah would be anxious for further news. We want to know what's going on. This came with the arrival of his own brother and other Jews with an eyewitness report of events that had probably taken place during the interruption of communications between Persia and Judea. They didn't get any news, wondering what was going on. Maybe you're waiting for news, wondering what's going on right now. I love the Bible. It addresses our smiles and our tears. They said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down. Its gates have been burned with fire. Considering the shock occasioned by Hanani's report, the events described must have been recent. The words of Hanani do not necessarily mean that the whole wall had been destroyed and all the gates burned with fire. We like to make things dramatic. We call this a hyperbole. The only portions of the wall and some of the gates were affected is clear from the subsequent description of the building of the wall found in Nehemiah 3. Some sections of the wall were merely repaired, while others were built. Similarly, some gates had to be rebuilt completely, while others needed only repairs. So here we have a complete picture. Check when people speak, we like to enlarge and impress with exciting news. I'm so glad about archaeologists discovered part of the wall that Nehemiah restored. And here you see it in Jerusalem, in the city of David. That only a partial destruction had occurred may also be inferred from the space of time, 52 days, in which Nehemiah was able to complete the rebuilding of the entire city wall. It's good to get this information. The story becomes more precious. In so short a time, it would have been all but impossible, even under the most favorable circumstances, to rebuild the entire wall, including its many gates, had it been in the condition in which Nebuchadnezzar left it. No, it didn't look like that. It was partially destroyed. Here you see some of the gates. The rapid reconstruction was due not only to the great enthusiasm of both leaders and people, but also to the progress undoubtedly made under Ezra and others before the Samaritans destroyed part of it. Verse 4 says, when I heard these things, can you see? I sat down. He couldn't stand up. I sat down. And then he wept. When last did you have a good cry? I love the Bible and its stories. We also react to bad news like he did. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. I love this. This is what we should do when you get bad news. As your spouse left you, sat down, weep, fast, mourn, pray to the God of heaven. Nehemiah was deeply shocked when he learned about the plight of his countrymen and the humiliation they experienced. Even if he had a partial knowledge of the events in the province of Judea, the reality apparently exceeded the greatest fears and caused him to weep. I wonder if they had tissues in those days. He just wept. When last did you had a good cry? We have enough traumas in life not to cry. But there is a therapeutic value of tears that heals. So cry if you must cry. During the captivity, fasting became a common practice among the Jews. Solemn fasts had been introduced on the anniversaries of the taking of Jerusalem, 586, burning of the temple, and the murder of Gedaliah. It also played a very prominent place in personal devotions of Daniel, Esther, Ezra, and Nehemiah are all mentioned as having fasted. And if you want to get a victory over a weakness in your life, stay without food, but drink water. Plead with God. Then I said, Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments. Can you see him praying? The opening of Nehemiah's prayer so closely parallels the thoughts and words of Daniel's prayer that it is probable that he had the words of the letter of Daniel before him. He read Daniel's prayer. Bible study is so interesting. Now let's compare Daniel's prayer. I prayed to the Lord my God and confessed, Lord, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments. I can imagine reading the book of Daniel and Daniel's prayer, and then he prayed the same prayer. We have sinned and done wrong, writes Daniel. We have been wicked and have rebelled. We have turned away from your commandments and laws. We have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes and our ancestors, and to all the people of the land. It's so inspiring to read these words. Pray to God when you've got bad news in your life right now. Nehemiah was familiar with Daniel's writings and admired their tone and spirit. Here the words differ from those of Daniel only by the substitution of Yahweh for Lord, Adonai, and addition of his own favorite phrase, God of heaven. Same prayer. Of course, God has got many different names, and Jesus has got many different names. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. Isn't this a beautiful prayer? I want to cry when I read this. This is how we should pray. Let your ear, God, be attentive. Your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for the servants of the people of Israel. I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We are sinful people. Confess your sinfulness. Let your ear be attentive, Lord. Do you know what I'm going through? Listen to me. We have acted wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed the commandments, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. Sorry, God. Sorry. The ordinances of the law are frequently summed up under the three terms here used. The ordinances of the law are frequently summed up under the three terms here used. But you stay here with me so that I may give you all the commandments, decrees, and laws. Same thing, but with different nuances. Commands, decrees, laws. You are to teach them to follow in the land I'm giving them to possess. Every time I visit Wadi Al-Qara, where Moses wrote the book of Deuteronomy, I think of these. It's a marvelous book, the book of Deuteronomy. If you've got time, read it. Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. This is a reference to the general sense of various passages. Bible writers habitually refer to earlier inspired writings in this way, quoting the thought rather than the exact words. Did you get this? Quoting the thought rather than the exact words. It says the same thing. But if you return to me and obey my commandments, this is what God says, then even if you exalt, and this is what the problem was right now, even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I've chosen as a dwelling for my name. Have you wandered far away from God? Ask Him to bring you back into a relationship with Him. They are your servants, and your people is praying to God, whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand, referring to Egypt. This refers to deliverance from Egypt with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm. And more recently, from the Babylonian captivity. He's a God who delivers miraculously. And if you're struggling right now, just fall on your knees and say, Lord, listen to my prayer and help me. Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant, and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. As you know, I was the cupbearer to the king. Who's this man? That is King Artaxerxes. Thus far not mentioned by name, but nevertheless always in the petitioner's mind. This is so beautiful. Nehemiah realized that the reproach of Jerusalem could be lifted only through royal intervention, and was convinced that he would have to go to Jerusalem himself to change the prevailing situation. What an exceptional man. And my friend, are you willing to fix up a mess somewhere? Maybe you've got to do it. This is what Nehemiah did. And I learned from this man's history. This day, this phrase probably means no more than upon this occasion, and should not be pressed as evidence that Nehemiah refers to the prayer he uttered on the day of his interview with the king. The prayer was on that day. I was cupbearer to the king. Had a good position. Not the sole cupbearer, but one of several. He mentions the fact here partly to explain the meaning of this man to the reader in partly because it was his office that gave him access to Artaxerxes. Nehemiah is one of many examples of exiled Jews attaining to positions of influence and working in the interests of their people, because cupbearers had contact with the inmates of the royal harem. Most of them were eunuchs. Is it possible that Nehemiah was a eunuch like Daniel? Father in heaven, this is a marvelous book with so many lessons. And we look up to you and we say, please God, do you hear us? We need you. Bless us as we work through the wonderful messages of the book of Nehemiah. In Jesus' name, amen.